Welcome back, everybody, to me talking about books in general and stuff. I have to go down into town to actually drop off a bunch of orders of records, and I figured I'll just do a video before that, because then it can render while I'm down there and don't need to use my computer, because my computer is slow, and when I render a video, I can't do anything else at the same time, or not much at the same time, so that's sort of my plan. Also, it gives me an excuse to drink beer at noon, which is also pretty cool, I think. So, let's get into generic book talk stuff, shall we? Well, cheers. Alright, so here we are. I want to do a bunch of videos in the near future on stuff, like general book stuff, and I figured this one is overdue because it will maybe help y'all to understand where I'm coming from, sort of, when I talk about books. And ideally also help you to understand. And the big question that I want to ask today is, why do I read? Which kind of entails, what do I enjoy while reading? Why do you read? Which will be questions for you to answer in the comments if you feel like it. There will be a test. And why do we read? We, in that case, meaning us humans as a fucking species that is fucking up this fucking planet. Sort of. Kinda. Alright. So that's sort of where I want to go with this. This is going to be more personal reflections and stuff. If you are interested, I could actually do some form of video on more like the philosophical aspects of it, like philosophy of literature, which is basically part of aesthetics. And we could look at that stuff if you feel like it. It wouldn't mean me having to go and reread a bunch of books that I read like a couple of years ago and have dim and vague memories of, so it's not something I need to do right now, but maybe some of you are interested in that kind of thing. However, let's start with, why do I read? Well, on the surface, to waste time, to procrastinate, and to keep me from doing stuff that I desperately need to do, but because of ADHD and other stuff, my mental health basically can't actually convince myself to do. So I just sit down and read or listen to audiobooks, but you know what I mean. So that's obviously the true answer. Now let's look at a more like a deeper one. This is going to go somewhere into the whole why do people read question, which is, there's basics that have been covered by other booktubers, and I'm just going to go really quickly. People read books for entertainment. A lot. I do so too sometimes. And when people read, we tend to focus on specific aspects of books, whether that's, the plot, the actual shit that's happening in a novel, or the characters, because we identify strongly with some of them, we hate some of them, we engage with the characters on the page. That's another aspect of why we tend to read books, and what we tend to enjoy in books. Then there is obviously the world building. Some people just love to read about fantastic worlds that are unique and whatnot. I've heard I've heard people like that exist. Then there's people that read about the themes, right? It's like, does this author engage with post-colonial philosophy? Does this author engage with racial injustice? Does this, there's a lot of themes that can be deduced from all kinds of books. Some authors do that fairly in your face. Others do it more like on the back burner or like in the background. And technically, that's my argument, you can find themes in every book ever written. Sometimes you need to, work a bit harder to actually make them stand out, but technically it's possible to find important themes in those books everywhere, all the time. Right, some people read for the action, right? Having cool battle scenes, lots of, big guns, big swords, explosions, that stuff. That's another valid point or a reason to read for entertainment, right? That's great. I'm talking about fiction so far, and I will remain on fiction because that's sort of my point that I try to make here. If you read non-fiction books, it's usually, depending on what kind of non-fiction, it's obviously to find out something. Right? You read a book on biology because you want to learn biology. You read, you read classics because your English teacher told you so, probably. Stuff like that. But, my point is, if you're reading non-fiction, it's fairly clear why you're doing this, unless it's exactly, and this is like the next one that we have in common, some people read for the prose. Reading for the prose, obviously. Sometimes we just like to see, some of us like to see beautiful words arranged in an appealing way. And that's fine. And you know what? That can happen in prose just as much as in poetry. So it's even more fine to do that, right? So I'm totally fine with that. That's another reason to read, books, I guess. And is there more? Probably there's more. There's obviously also reading for the thrills and the chills, which is kind of a connection of like, I guess, is connected to plot, but it's also something else, and that is reading for the atmosphere, right? We read books because they have an effect on how we feel, because they create an atmosphere. That's something that you find a lot in horror books, for example. It's like that creeping feeling on the back of your neck that you get just from reading the description of a haunted house or whatever. That's not plot, but it's still something else, I guess, reading for the atmosphere. All right, those are a lot of those reasons why people read and enjoy books, and I am guilty of most of those. Some of them more than others, and that's sort of where I wanted to go with this. And I maybe will add another one that I think is a very strong one for me, that is connected to reading for themes. I'm definitely a theme reader, but there's more than that. And that is reading for myself. I mean, I'm reading fiction. But I am someone who thinks and feels that fiction is, more than just entertainment. Reading fiction has impact on our life, on how we view the world and what we do with it and so forth. And that's something that I do a lot. So let me go on, go through those and just tell you how much I value some of them and how little I value some others of them. I'm not that much of a plot reader, which is why I don't care about spoilers most of the time. I mean, if there's a very, very big reveal that kind of puts the whole novel or whole story, reframes the whole thing, then I'd appreciate to not have that spoiler. But in general, I don't care about spoilers because plot is not something that I'm hugely interested in. As long as it's solid, it doesn't have too many plot holes, like The Wheel of Time, or whatever, I'm fine with it. I'll just leave it ticking along. And I'm not a huge character reader. I'm fine with characters as long as they, act reasonable, in a way, or believable. Then I'm fine. World building is similar. I mean, unless world building, has something to stand out for me, I'm like, yeah, it's a fantasy world. There's obviously some that work really well. I did enjoy the jungly feels of whatnot of, say, Blood and Bone by Ian Asselmont, or the weird, dangerous jungle, weird magical dangerous jungle of Cameron Hurley's, The Broken Empire? Something like that. Broken Empire, Mirror Empire, I have no... Worldbreaker is the name of the trilogy. Go read that. It's not a good series, but it has a fantastic first book, and it has an amazing setting. So yeah, that kind of stuff. Or the weird bug tech in Cameron Hurley's Beldam Apocrypha series. Yeah, that's stuff that interests me because it's unique. But in a lot of other worlds, I'm like, yeah, all right, you spend tons of pages to describe every minute detail of your society there, and I just don't care, Brandon Sanderson. Something like that, right? So same with, say, Wheel of Time right now. The world building just doesn't really faze me much. It's yeah, it's there. It annoys me, but everything about these books annoys me, so that's not a big deal there either. So yeah, I'm, that's not something I'm hugely into. Action and battle scenes, mostly not my big thing, right? It's I read through those, and I'm like, works or works not. So huge battle scenes in, say, The Crippled God. I couldn't care less for those final battles, right? I mean, there's stuff happening there that I really, really, connect to in a lot of ways, but how they arrange their troops, fuck that, I don't care. It's like, they're veteran military commanders. I assume they know what they're doing. So just get on with that and let's get to where people actually suffer. Sort of, right? So, action, nah, not so much. Now, that may be connected to the fact that I'm not that much of a visual person. I don't have, I can deal without, and probably it's just because I'm not good at it, for obvious reasons, but I don't visualize a sword fight in my brain with all the funny details and whatnot. I'm like, yeah, there's two people stabbing at each other with, pieces of iron. I'm fine. One of them will leave, and the other one will just, stay on the ground, probably. It's fine. Then I multiply that by 10,000 and we have a battle. And I'm like, yep, that's it. So not that much about the action. What else did I say? Well, themes, yes, I'm a theme reader, definitely, because I think in themes, in general, in life, I think about a lot of that stuff. I'm also, I would call it a meta reader. I think a lot about structure of novels, of books, for whatever reason. So I read books to look at the craft of books. I'm like, yeah, this is well constructed. I may not, be amazed by it, but I like watching an artist or a craftsman actually doing a good job. That's something that that gives me joy. That is something I just sit down and yeah, this is not innovative in any way, but it is just extremely well done. Which is, for example, why I did very much love Night of Knives by Cam Esselmond. Is that the most impressive novel of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, the novels of the Malazan Empire, Path to Ascendancy, and so forth? No, it's not the most impressive, unique, or whatever Malazan novel out there, but it is tight, and it is extremely well executed. I'm there for it. That's great. There's other books like that where I'm like, yeah, this is, just extremely well done. I would say Wilding Hall by Elizabeth Hand is one of those. I'm like, yeah, this is not, the most innovative novel out there, although the structure is kind of a neat, transcription, I would say, a transformation of the old, Dracula-style letter novel into the 21st century. But mostly, I just like to sit back and see something well executed and extremely well done. So that's something that I'm definitely there for. That's something I really appreciate, which is probably why I keep on banging on all the stuff that Robert Jordan gets wrong in Wheel of Time that annoy me so much. A lot of that is just me thinking it's not well done. It's not well done. It's unsubtle. It's shoddy. I'm already talking Wheel of Time again, which I shouldn't do so. So yeah, I'm there for which is what I would call a meta reader, looking at how stuff is done in a novel. And a lot of me praising a book or being annoyed about books is very much about me looking at how I feel the writer accomplishes what they set out to do. That's definitely something that will make me argue or talk about and think about a book if it's either well done or extremely, badly done, when I get really pissed off. Which is why, for example, the Malazan stuff really is something that I enjoy a lot, because you can see authors, especially Stephen Erickson in that regard, really trying to do more than just tell a compelling story. There's way more there. There's you can see the author wrestling. You can read, but while reading, you can see the author wrestling with the universe in general and the book and Stephen Erickson with his craft. So that's something that I personally really enjoy. I'm also a reader that loves prose. I read for the prose. And there's probably reasons for that. I've always been a very language-focused person. That's probably, once again, connected to my disability. It's I'm not a visual person. I'm a language-focused person. I think verbally. I have always had a terrible fondness for extremely bad jokes and puns. All that stuff that you can do with language. Twisting language, doing terrible things to language is something that I enjoy. Doing wonderful things with language is also something that I tend to enjoy, but me being the kind of terrible person that I am also very much in favor of the latter, which is then once again connected to me studying philosophy, right? Philosophy is also all about language. Language is something that I'm fascinated by. I'm not a linguist. I don't want to be a linguist. I'm just very much into like seeing what can be done with the language that we have right now and whatnot, which is one of the reasons why I love, say, Douglas Adams or Terry Pratchett. Those are people that do crazy, insane stuff with language, and I'm all there for that. So yeah, looking at all of those things, this is sort of what I want to do to explain why I like books and whatnot. I do like themes very much. I've said that before. It's like looking at books, picking out what those authors are wrestling with, trying to extrapolate positions of like what they might try to say or might not try to say, or at least get me thinking about subjects that I was just not thinking about because I live in all the glorious privileges that I have. You know, racial injustice is something that I have never experienced. Or, you know, gender discrimination, once again. I was like, I'm a fucking privileged white man. I know that. So reading books about those kind of things is something that gives, you know, sometimes gives me pause, gets me to think about these kind of things, and I'm there for it, right? So I'm a theme reader, I'm a language reader, and I'm what I just called a meta reader, which is looking at the art and craft of writing. Those are the three things that I personally really, really enjoy about books. So if, you know, any of that kind of stuff is like stands out or is a key factor in a book, there's a good chance that I will like it. If none of those is like very prominent, then chances are I'll just, you know, go through it and like, yeah, well, that was okay. I'll move on. And frankly, there's a lot of that going on in both fantasy and science fiction, which are obviously some of the genres that I personally, in general, enjoy reading about, because they have the potential to deal with a lot of these stuff, especially themes in the case of science fiction. I would argue also in the case of fantasy, but you know. But that, once again, explains why I love authors like Gene Wolfe or Jack Vance or Ursula K. Le Guin. Those are authors that have at least one, mostly two or three of those things as key factors in what they do. It's why I personally, I'm not a huge fan of, say, A Song of Ice and Fire. George R. R. Martin is not... I mean, the construction of the first couple of novels is, I would say, good, and it brings new things to the table. But world building, no. Themes, well, it probably will all make me angry if I actually dig down at, like, the themes. And George R. R. Martin's prose isn't that impressive. It's just, like, pedestrian, I would say. Doesn't really, you know... I'm far from calling it bad, but it's not something that will make me, you know, be really impressed. Similar with someone like Joe Abercrombie. It's like, yeah, that's well done. The world building, not so much my thing. Themes, at least in the first novel, not so much. Where Abercrombie gets me is with his like standalone novels where he tackles different subgenres of fiction and puts his own like stamp on it, which is why I think The Heroes is such a good book. It's probably still my favorite Joe Abercrombie novel. It is because it is an extremely well executed war novel, just done in a well, great way. Plus, Joe Abercrombie knows how to do the prose. Like his like wit and dialogue is just always top notch. So having two out of those three things there, apart from, I mean, I'm not that much of a like fan of the themes that are usually bandied about in war novels. They're just not like that much. But you know, that's why I love that one. It's why I kind of don't like the first trilogy. It's not that well executed in a lot of ways. So yeah, I guess I hope that kind of explains where I'm generally at when it comes to books and what kind of books interest me and what kind of books don't interest me that much or grab me. Now let's look at that other thing that I mentioned, the reading for myself. It's something that I've said before, and I'll probably explain it more in like future videos because I'm a political person. I've said that before, and I will always say that I'm a political person. I think all of us humans are, to a larger or smaller degree, political people. And I think art is always political. in a lesser, smaller, or larger degree. That's just how it is. That's just like how we as social creatures are wired. It takes a specific definition of politics, obviously. I'm not talking party politics, but it's like, if we define politics as we have certain views on how the world is today and how the world should be and how the world should not be, then that's politics. And that's what we all are about as people, right? And it's something that I feel, in general, like books can help us with, fiction can help us with. In general, like being better people is something that books can help us with. And that's the largest reason of why I read books, is looking at their effect on me and their potential effect on other people, and talking and thinking about that. It is why I so much appreciate authors like Stephen Erickson, like Richard K. Morgan, like Cameron Hurley, what I call angry writers. Terry Pratchett, obviously, as well. Those are people that those are authors that very explicitly want their books to do more than just entertain us, than just give us a good time for a couple of hours. They want us to be better people. They want to be the world a better world. That want us to, do better. And now, obviously, I've just mentioned mostly authors that are fairly explicitly, on the more progressive side, so to speak, of the spectrum, because that's sort of where I am. I'm left wing. I've never made a secret out of that, but I would argue it is the same thing if you're not a progressive person, but a more conservative person. The same thing, because there's authors on that side of the spectrum as well that write books that want to change the world. And I would still respect those books more than, or like they will still engage me more than books that don't do that explicitly. Because it's something that I engage with. And I'll probably be very, very pissed off if I read those kinds of books. I guess. I haven't. It's been a while since I read something like that. I guess you could call Flashback by Dan Simmons one of those books, and it made me angry no end. It's a terrible book. Don't go and read it. It sucks a lot. And it hasn't aged well. That too. But it certainly grabs me more because it's the way I think, the way I act in like everyday life. It's the filter I see the world through. Is it stronger with me than with other people? With many other people? I assume so. But it's the one thing that I guess y'all should be aware of when I talk about books. Those kind of things are things that I look forward in a book. Those are the things I will praise in a book because they engage me, that they make me angry, they make me feel, they make me maybe sometimes even, happy or whatever. But those are the things that I appreciate in books. And if I figured it's important to tell you that. So, let's look at why you are reading books. I assume some of you are reading books. Otherwise, why are you watching my videos? Which is obviously also another question that you can always answer, like, why are you actually watching this? But I assume y'all are reading books, or at least interested in books and fiction. So I was just like wondering, like, what's it that you get out of reading books? Is it just like spending time? Is it, living vicariously? Is it trying to figure out why stuff is the way it is? And that's another one that I kind of forgot to mention, I guess, because I'm unstructured, right? I love to find out stuff and feel smart. It's why I love books like Thomas Pynchon, like Gene Wolfe, stuff where I can figure out puzzles and references and shit that are not necessarily important for the actual story. They just make me happy because they're like kind of Easter eggs that I can find and stuff. That's another thing that I personally enjoy, but, I'm a smartass. And there's another video in that somewhere in the future about that specific aspect of some books. But however, to get back to it, it's like, why are you guys reading books? What are you enjoying about them? What's your focus at? It's like, what kind of things do you get out of reading books? Because, there's easier ways out there to spend our time, right? We can just, like, watch TV shows, play computer games, do whatever. It's like, why are y'all reading books, and what do you get out of it? Just think about it and tell me. I would really love to, hear from you on that. All right, so that's the call for action. And if you're actually, doing that, why not also like and subscribe, right? Anyway, let's get back to that final one. Why are we reading as a species? And that's like a question that obviously has been more on the philosophical side. I certainly have specific philosophical theories in mind that I think sort of capture an important aspect of that. I've talked about that before. I might do it again. But the question is like, why is literature still a thing? Why do people still read books? Is there something in general there in like, why do we tell stories to each other? Why, and if so, what kind of stories do we tell to each other? Can we learn something from that? Can we figure out something from that? Is it like, do we enjoy hero narratives as like a planet, sort of as a species? And if so, why? I mean, that's obviously something that I have spoken about before. That's something we as a species, once again, have thought about a lot before. But I feel it's worth looking at that, and that's sort of like an idea that I had to, maybe go into. It's like I spent a couple of semesters doing courses on studying, not teaching, obviously, I'm not a teacher, on philosophy of literature, truth in literature, is there such a thing, truth and fiction, those kind of things. And I think there's stuff we can learn from that. There's obviously stuff we can then also port to other aspects of art, movies, computer games, what have you. And I figured it might be interesting to have us a bit of a closer look on that. Look at, I don't know, Kendall Walton's Mimesis Make-Believe, and books like that. Let's not go too deeply into like analytic philosophy that tries to define truth through logical equations and shit, because that sucks and kind of misses the mark. But let's look at that if y'all are interested. If not, that's fine. I can do without rereading Walton. I would have to do that. I would have to go and maybe do some reading in Martha Nussbaum again. Stuff like that. Good philosophy that will then hopefully make us smarter about books and maybe help us analyze or, think more about why we are reading and what we are enjoying in the books that we read. So that's sort of what I wanted to do today, give you a bit of an insight on like what I look for in books and what kind of makes me evaluate books in a way, and at the same time ask you what you want and maybe propose something for the future, if you're interested. So I'll go and drop off records at the post office while this renders, and then I'll see you in the next one when I get angry about the Wheel of Time. Cheers.